You know, you've had,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you had investigated, you know, testosterone, TRT, that, you know, that there was something off on
Mm-hmm.
you, and that, and you went and got, you know, diagnosed with, you know, low testosterone, and that, you know, you've taken therapy for that, and that's really changed you, you know, you're at least physically, maybe mentally too, quite a bit. You want to talk about, you know, what what you experienced, and your thoughts on how to maybe, you know, how that applies, and even to, I guess, to the spiritual life, I guess, if you think that affects it, you know, the testosterone levels in men today. We talked about this. I think I had a real long
Mm-hmm.
conversation about kind of
Yeah.
this is truly an epidemic among men, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple things. I mean, number one is like we're seeing uh, historically low levels of testosterone in our society now.
Mm-hmm.
That's an indisputable, that's just a fact. Number two is that we're seeing the levels of testosterone drop off more rapidly and sooner than they had historically also. So guys today in their mid 30s are experiencing significant decreases in testosterone
Mm-hmm.
that I don't think were equivalent to what previous generations had experienced. I think that's part of the reason sometimes you see photos of older generation people in the, you know, in the 50s and 60s, and there was just, honestly, there was a lot less obese people. There was a lot less people overweight and out of shape. Testosterone is the regulating hormone for men. I mean, it is, I mean,
Everything,
it
yeah.
is, yeah, it's everything for a man. You know, women have estrogen, and women have, people don't realize this, women have really high levels of estrogen that like men could not like stomach, could not experience without like debilitating side effects. And conversely, women have very low levels of testosterone. They actually need very low levels of testosterone. Like they need a very little bit of testosterone compared to what a man needs to even feel normal. And so there's really two aspects of testosterone. Number one is it plays a huge part in your mental outlook, how you feel about life. And there's just simple ways that you look at it. Like, you know, when you look at a guy who's 16 to 20, he just feels like he could take on the world, you know, and he just is hard charging and he's ready to go and just like nothing can stop him. And you're like, you know, it's not wise, but it's just a fearlessness and whatever else. And a huge part of that is just that he's got loads of free testosterone in his body, which is giving him this outlook on life, like that he's unstoppable. And then number two is that you have the physical components, which is the side effects from having low testosterone are really quite pronounced. So my guess is that probably somewhere in my mid 30s, maybe a little bit after that, maybe 36 or so, I believe a big part of it was that when I took the desk job and I started sitting every day, started putting on weight, I just wasn't active, et cetera, et cetera. You know, I think it really affected me and hit me pretty rapidly. And I noticed I noticed changes that, you know, historically I didn't put a bunch of fat on. And then all of a sudden I started putting fat on and it was just really easy. And I found that it was harder to get the fat off. And then, you know, within the last year or so, and right around that time, I remember talking to my doctor about it. And you know, I just had a general practitioner and she was like, you know, it's probably not that. You're still kind of young. You're 36. And she didn't want to test for it. And I didn't realize at the time that the reason they don't want to test for it is because you're most likely going to come back low. And then they're going to have to prescribe it, which they don't really want to do. So I ignored it essentially at that point and said, okay. And then, you know, over the last 3 years, and by the time I moved to Texas, I was like, man, I had 3 or 4 things that were hitting me all at once. Number one was I could not seem to get a lot of really good sleep. And it wasn't, I don't believe it was sleep apnea or anything like that. I would have an 8-hour, 9-hour window marked out to sleep. And I'd sleep 6.5, 7 hours and just wake up and just be fatigued. But I just felt like I couldn't go back to sleep, you know? And I had periods too where I would wake up and my mind would be racing or thinking about work and stuff like this. And I just was experiencing changes that like I had never woken up in my not never, but I had almost never woken up and thought about anything. You know,
Mhm.
I'd go to bed and sleep like a log, and it started to change. And then little things like I hurt my shoulder when I was about 38. I kind of tweaked it doing something it didn't even make sense. And then it just took longer to heal.
Yeah.
And I mean, I lifted weights during that period, but I had to really work around the issue. And I noticed like, man, my body's not recovering like it used to. You know, in your 20s, you would like strain your tricep at the gym. They'd be like, oh, it's jacked. And then like 2 weeks later, you'd be like, oh, no big deal. It's fixed, you know? And I noticed the stuff wasn't happening. And then particularly, I pulled an adductor muscle in my leg, which is like the inside of your groin area.
Yeah.
And I was still deadlifting, but I couldn't squat. And I was like 6, 7 months into it, and it would not get better. And I couldn't for the life of me figure it out. I was still strong. I mean, I deadlifted 515 at that point, but it just like stuff was not healing, and I was tired. I mean, I felt like I was tired all the time. And I would, you know, I was disciplined. So I was still working out. I was still doing the stuff I needed to do. Just felt like crap a lot, you know, and that's really how it felt. So I thought, you know, at this point I'm 40 or almost 40. My test levels have probably gone down. I'll get them checked. And so I went and got a blood panel done, and they were atrociously low. And I mean, I was shocked because I was like, I go, man, I'm still going to work. I work full time. I've got a wife. I've got kids. I've got a church. I've got all this stuff I'm doing. I'm very motivated and disciplined, right? I mean, those are things, thank God, you know, I had going on, but I couldn't figure out why is my testosterone so low. And I talked to the guy at the clinic, and he said, he goes, we got guys who come in here who are Navy SEALs, and they can't figure out what's wrong with them. They've been Navy SEALs for 20 years. They can't figure out what's wrong with them. He goes, they test their test, and it's way lower than yours even. And I was way below the reference. So the reference range, historically, the reference range is basically 400 to 1100 milligrams per deciliter. And now they've shifted that to 3 to 900. So that shows you where they're going. They're going to keep shifting it. But I was at like 237. So I was well below 300. And at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm 40 years old. This is an uphill battle. I'm not going to double my testosterone. I'm not going to get within a normal range, or really what I think is the normal range. And I, you know, probably had very high testosterone in my 20s. So I really felt like I was experiencing the effects very pronounced. But you know, the guy at the clinic said, look, we got guys who are Navy SEALs who are double-digit testosterone. And he goes, he just said, we just see it all the time. We just see it all the time. Guys in their late 30s, early 40s who come in, they know something is off. And we run the test, and they said, you know, it's a third party. It's Quest Labs that does it.
Yeah.
And they go, dude, it's just low. So, you know, at that point, I got a prescription. I kind of waited out, really thought about it. I'm like, well, look, I have very low test. If I don't like it, I mean, just come off, because, you know, it can't really do a lot of harm. You can harm your system when you're in your 20s and you have a lot of good testosterone and your body's functioning normally. You don't want to shut off production and get on artificial testosterone, because when you come off of the artificial testosterone, sometimes your body doesn't rebound back, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm like, man, my levels are so low at this point. I'm not like risking a lot. And I'm like, the worst that can happen is I just come off it. It's not a huge financial investment or anything else. So I got on it probably about 6 months ago, and immediately, just within 3 weeks or so, I was like, I felt like my mind felt like it came back alive. Like it just can't, I just had a brain fog. It seemed like all the time. And that was the part actually that kind of freaked me out beforehand. I didn't mention that, but I had really bad brain fog, and I had 1 or 2 times that I forgot a conversation I had with somebody. And it actually, that's where I knew about the effects of testosterone. Said, I've got to check this, but if this is not low testosterone, like I may have to get like an MRI or something, because like something's not going on right. Like I shouldn't be forgetting conversations. And but anyways, so that was it, man. Within 3-4 weeks, I just felt like my mind started coming out of brain fog. My adductor started to heal almost immediately. Body fat started to come off, and I was like, oh, I feel younger and more like myself than I previously did.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, so I mean, I think it's again, I think doing doing this in your 30s and into the 40s is probably going to be a pretty normal thing. And I mean, they're seeing more and more of it now. Just, people are sitting more. They're they have whatever you want to say, but they have cell phones, they have Wi-Fi signals. We have more phytoestrogens in our water, in our chemicals. Yeah. So.
Right. When you mentioned this to me about this, back this past summer, we talked about it. I did a little research on it, and I've come to the conclusion that there's a lot to this that goes to in the ministry of men, especially young men. Like a lot of this, as a priest, you'll get a lot of people come to you with a little bit of a lethargy. Maybe they think they're depressed. They have difficulties at home with relations with the wife, and I think it all comes and for many reasons. Society's changed. There's this this drag on masculinity. They say it as some, as we hear that toxic. It's toxic, but lifestyle, food choices, and I think it does, as you say, affect testosterone. And I think a lot of this stuff spiritually can be addressed. And I think you told me about this could probably be addressed more on a clinical basis, with testosterone. I mean, have you had any conversations with some of your own flock about, has it been a thing that's helped people, awaken them that maybe this is not such a spiritual battle, but maybe a physiology one?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really give a lot of specifics, but yeah, I can definitely say that there are men that are struggling with what they think is, they would describe it as they're not depressed, they're just not engaged with life. And it happens in their mid-30s, it happens into their 40s. I do think that there's this correlation between this and the midlife crisis that men experience, where they lose a sense of purpose or a sense of meaning, or just kind of gets cloudy, and they kind of feel like a beast of burden. They're not really sure why they're doing what they're doing, and they don't feel as engaged in life. Like it's men want to win,
Right.
And some men are super competitive, and there's a spectrum, but men generally, they want to do well. Even if they say, well, I'm not super competitive, I still would like to win. But that's where you see the shift happen. It seems with low testosterone, a lot of guys they stop almost caring about winning. They kind of lose that edge. And so a lot of things in life require you to show up and kind of fight for and engage, and they kind of lose that, and they don't know why, but it creeps in. And so yeah, I mean, I've talked to a number of people about it, and obviously some people have taken steps and said that they felt a lot better. They couldn't believe how much their overall general sense of well-being was. And again, these things are not, we have women who are, the minute that they start going, postmenopausal or whatever else, or their estrogen crashes, I mean, they get prescriptions for estrogen. I mean, like that. And it's not a taboo thing. It's not strange. It's not weird or whatever else. It's very normal. So when you're taking medication, you're taking hormone medication because you need that. You need those regulating hormones. It's not a psychoactive substance or anything else. It's like people with high blood pressure that are genetically predisposed to high blood pressure take medication to lower their blood pressure. These are not abnormal things. This is not a psychological treatment. It's restoring kind of balance to the person. So, but yeah, I mean, you can read testimonials online and everything else, and I would say the vast majority of men feel just incredibly better when they're on it. Does it solve life problems? No. Does it help you to solve life's problems? Yeah, because if you feel lethargic and you don't feel engaged and you feel like your mind is, in a fog, it's really hard to engage and work through stuff because you just have no drive. And I think sometimes too, guys get older, they start putting on weight, and you say, hey, go to the gym, lift weights. And they start going, and the weight doesn't come off because they don't have the testosterone. They don't realize this, but testosterone is a huge component in weight loss. And then they say, man, when I was in my 20s, I could eat whatever I wanted and I never gained weight. You're like, well, that's because you had a bunch of testosterone. That's really what it was. You weren't better genetically at that point in terms of, you know what I mean? If you were that type of person, you just had more free testosterone in your body. And that's really it. And so they'll go back to the gym and they'll go, man, people work out and they'll go, man, I feel tired. I'm exhausted when I get to the gym after work. I'm unmotivated and I work out and don't see results. And it's like, it's actually not the gym. It's a lot of times it's a hormone imbalance. If you correct the hormone imbalance and then start going to the gym, they're like, oh, I can recover. I can lose fat. I can feel better. It's the complete picture. Again, it doesn't solve anything. It just gives you the ability to, I should say it solves that problem, but you have to really unpack it. You have to do the work. You still have to stay disciplined. You still have to watch your diet, but you will see the results that you just would not see otherwise. So, and again, I wouldn't recommend this for people that don't have low testosterone. If somebody's in their mid to early 30s and or in their 20s or whatever else, it's just, I would not recommend it. You can do some things to counteract. Testosterone has a propensity towards infertility on men. So you can do some things. You can take some medications, and I do to keep your fertility there. But I would never recommend this for somebody in their 20s who doesn't need it and just wants a bump. It's like, no, have a family, have children, do all that stuff. You know what I mean?